What's up, Liron here, and today we're gonna have a real-time narrated tutorial on how to paint this scene. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. So as I mentioned today, I'm going to do a real-time tutorial of how I paint this scene, which means I'm going to be painting while I'm talking super hard, but I'm trying to get better at it. Now, I do want to try a little experiment. So for the next 5 or 6 videos, I'm considering doing only these kinds of tutorials, just to give it a shot. So I want to hear your feedback in a comment box below. Would you be interested in about a week and a half or 2 weeks of just these kinds of tutorials, real-time, narrated, no time-lapse, no paint show, no painting masters, just for the next 2 weeks? Let me know what you think, and I'll decide based on that if I want to continue doing these for the next 5 or 6 next videos, okay? So here's a scene I painted about 2 weeks ago, and then I decided to show you how I did it because it's a scene I'm already familiar with. It's going to be a little easier to do a real-time tutorial based on that. So I painted this, and I did make a few adjustments, a few improvements. I actually like the color combination here a little better than here. I added people here. So in any case, I really hope you're going to enjoy this one, and let's get started. Okay, so let's get started here, and I want to make this a very fun process. So I'm going to keep the drawing simple as well, and very kind of descriptive, and you'll see as I go along. So here, around this area, we have some trees. So I'm just dividing the areas so that I can tell what goes where. Now here we have a very gentle perspective. The horizontal line will be somewhere around here. Okay, so that's all we need. Now the vanishing point is going to be somewhere around, and I'm just looking at the picture and trying to assess. So it'll probably be somewhere around here actually. So now if you watched my video on perspective drawing, all I'm doing is creating these lines, and it's probably going to be a little outside, so maybe even here on my board, because the angle is less aggressive on the rooftops. What I'm actually doing is just connecting all of the points I see, all of the straight lines I see, and trying to figure out where they meet based on the photo reference. And then we have this under the horizon line, so it goes the other way around. And I'm just going to start dividing this into different parts. So here, and I'm actually taking measurements, so that'll be around here is where one of the main buildings starts or ends, depending on how you want to look at it. So we get this building, then we have this side of the rooftop, just like that. We have the actual rooftop, and again, I'm going to keep this very light and quick. And I know a lot of you have wanted real-time tutorials, so this is really the opportunity to do so. And it's more fun for me editing-wise. It's just easier to edit videos that have been filmed like that, rather than the videos that I have to narrate later on in recording. So anyway, we have this rooftop, then we have an additional one right over here, smaller one. That's going to connect to this kind of a corner right around here. And then this will go straight into another rooftop. And I probably made this one a little too large, so I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm actually working based on a photo reference together with a painting I already made, a really quick painting I already made of this scene. And then I'm going to connect this rooftop here, this rooftop there. Then we have this small triangular rooftop as well. And that's really going to be in the shadows of these trees. So maybe let's break off the shape like that. Then we've got another rooftop a little taller coming from right around here. And I'm actually starting my experiment. Perhaps I mentioned this in the introduction because I'm recording this before the introduction. But I'm starting this experiment of just sharing quick painting processes and seeing how that works out, and if you enjoy that even more than the rest of the series. And we'll see how that goes. I may decide to break it off in the middle. But we'll see. Now I barely erase. I don't want to erase too much. That ruins the paper if you overdo it. So now we have this line of foliage here that I want to get like this. And again, it's all connecting to that vanishing point, as you can see here. not 100% accurate, but just accurate enough. And now we have this line of the building. Now this area in the original painting I did feels a little empty, so I'm gonna add this kind of a pergola. I'm not sure if that's how you call it, but kind of a thing that casts some shadow here. So that's gonna be here. I don't know, it may be a mistake or it may not be a mistake. We're gonna give it a shot. And then it's gonna cast a strong shadow here towards this area. Now here we have from this spot connecting on a bunch of shrubs and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna have this line of foliage, and it's gonna contrast nicely with the shadow under the buildings and so on. So that's gonna be a nice little part. Hopefully I'll share the entire process, but if I feel like a part is boring or or is too repetitive, then I'll probably eliminate some part of that. So that goes here. Now we have a very strong and sharp shadow under the trees that come from this direction, so we're gonna do that. And we have that tree trunk here that I do want to make sure I end up connecting to the ground. Then we have some other tree trunks in the background, and you see it's more of a symbolic drawing what I'm doing here. It's really just a symbol for where to put things later on. So here we're gonna have two more trees because I felt like this needs some balancing out. And then what else? We have a few sticks, kind of things on the ground here. They're gonna cast a gentle shadow to the right. What else is interesting? We have a few lines guiding us around here. Some windows that I don't even think I need to really put in, but I can put in just a few, just to give us that impression while painting. And with that being said, this one's pretty much ready to be painted. And you see I'm being very suggestive with all of the details, with everything I'm doing. Just a suggestion, just a hint, okay? I don't want to overdo the details or anything like that. So what we're going to do now is start painting the first wash. I'm going to rearrange some stuff here. And one last thing before we move on, I almost forgot. This part of the shrubbery is going to be in the shadow, and I'm going to use that to my advantage to put a person in here. Now, a lot of people have trouble with this, with putting people in their paintings. So let me give you a really cool, quick tip. If you look at the original reference photo, then the door will probably be this high, okay? So all you have to do now is imagine a person is about that height. So a bit lower than that. So it starts around here, and then his foot on the ground right here. The head is about 1/8 of the whole figure. So I'm gonna put that here and some legs. And maybe let's put another person next to them a little taller. Just for variety's sake. Sometimes can be boring if you just put one person. You know, I like to sometimes put like a dog or walking a dog or something like that. So there you go, 2 people, very simple. Now let's get to painting this. So let's get started with the first layer, and I laid out everything in a way that I think you can really see the whole process. Now the first wash is all about allowing everything to mix together and to be free and to enjoy yourself, okay? Now, one thing I will mention, and I'm gonna use a bit of French ultramarine here. One thing I will mention is you wanna make sure that you preserve your highlights as always. And you also wanna make sure you don't lose too much of the vibrancy of paints such as yellow and bright paints that you want to make sure that are visible in the end product, okay? Because yellows tend to get lost really fast in favor of greens. So that's something I want to pay attention to here. So I'm just going to place some of this. I originally did this part kind of wet and wet, but here I decided I'm just going to go for it like that. And there may be a few stray clouds in here. This is going to be some trees, so it doesn't really matter. Using mostly French ultramarine here, hopefully the blue, or ultramarine blue rather, and hopefully the blue comes off right here. Now, for the entire buildings and all of that, I'm going to use mainly yellow, okay? So nickel azo yellow, and I'm going to dig through the whole contaminated area, and probably I'm going to add a bit of raw sienna to that, because I like that paint a lot. And the real magic will come once we start adding in the rooftops and everything. I'm going to start actually with the trees here on the right. Just going to let it all kind of blend together. Now for the trees, I am using yellow to get started. because under that yellow, this yellow will end up helping us produce the green we want, okay? So I'm gonna place that in here. Probably I'll have to close off that area just a little bit using my both hands right now, which is always a challenge, but a useful technique nonetheless. And I'm gonna use these yellows to cover up everything. You see here, every little thing. And I'm trying to work fast to make sure that the wash doesn't dry on me. But with smaller pieces like that, it's less of a worry, I will admit. Now I'm gonna connect this whole section of on the right with the buildings. And again, this is me trying out a bit of a different work order than the last time. So you can definitely feel free to try out some things in a different way, especially if you're repeating the same scene. Now I feel much more free to just give it a go and try out some new things. And I'm constantly varying my mix and moving between the raw sienna and the nickel azo, so that I can create some interesting yellows here. Now here around the bottom, I'm gonna just use the yellow, maybe some nickel azo, because I felt like the last time I really lost some of my highlights that way. So I'm gonna use that. The people are gonna be somewhat in the shadow. I still haven't decided exactly on the format, if they're gonna be entirely in the shadow or not. But now we just have one last important thing to do, and that is add some of the reds for the rooftops, which is a really important part. Again, I'm going to use more of that kind of cooler red, not necessarily the warmer red. So kind of a mix. I'm always mixing my primaries up, trying to find what will look good, what will be interesting. Now the sky and the rooftops are going to bleed a bit. That's fine. I don't mind that. You can see I'm trying to be very loose and free with my lines. This rooftop I'm gonna make it a little stronger maybe. This as well. It's all gonna blend together nicely. And for this part of the shed, this dark part, I don't even know if I should do too much. I'm just gonna place it in like that. Let that do its thing. Maybe just hint at a very gentle shadow here. I don't want it to blend too much into the yellow, but with that, we're almost done. What I could do is go back and let's see if it's wet enough still. So it looks like it's already dried a bit. So I'm gonna just let it dry and then come back with a few other washes, and hopefully the result will be pleasing to the eye. I'm gonna add some greens to the trees, some shadows. Right now it's just a very quick sketch. Doesn't have too much meaning behind it except for the initial drawing that we did to suggest all the details. So let's let it dry for a while, come back and start adding in the mid values and the darker values. Okay, so as you can see, the painting is almost completely dried. I will say that ideally I would allow it for like 2 more hours to dry just so that it flattens completely. Now it didn't flatten completely, but because I want to make sure I make use of the daylight, and I'm afraid it's going to get a little cloudy later on, so I will actually continue right now, but it is fully dry. It just hasn't unbuckled completely. So now what we're going to do is establish the mid values. So I don't want to go too dark, because if you notice around the edges of the trees, there are some areas that are a little darker, but not fully strong shadows. So I want to establish that in this stage, and I'm just going to start putting these areas in here, like so. And remember always, if you can get a detail in fewer brush strokes, that's usually preferable, just to keep things a little simpler and good looking. So we've got this part of the trees. Now this part is where it's really more well lit, but now for the more inner parts, we can actually start darkening things up significantly. But you have to be careful because we're still doing wet and wet, so I don't want the darker paint to spread out too much. So you just have to be careful to keep some safe distance. Now French ultramarine or ultramarine blues, they tend to have some problems when it comes to producing really true dark values. So this is something you have to account for by just using a lot of thick paint. Okay, that's just part of it. And there's no choice, no other choice than that. I wanted to leave a few gaps, but I kind of forgot, so that's fine. But what is important here is to leave some highlights around this area, because this is where the tree at the back, the trees and the back are, and they connect to this part. So I'm just just following basically, again, the answer is always in front of you. So if you're unsure at any point, just take a close, hard look at the reference and you'll slowly but surely figure things out. The most important part for me here is to be careful with the shape of the rooftop here. Have some trees here maybe. And here I made a very small, almost mistake, but that's fine. We're still gonna have the triangular shape of the rooftop here. And what's important is to leave those highlights that we see around the horizon line, so somewhere around here. Okay, there are some highlights there that I want to make sure I don't touch. Now, I'm not going to make this any darker than that for now, because it does seem like it's dark enough. But the tree trunks are important to get, okay? And some other details. I'm going to switch to my thinner Princeton synthetic brush here, just because I want to get a few finer details and I don't want to mess it up too much. So we do have this tree trunk here, maybe one like that, very gently. And I'm going to negative paint around the people. This is, by the way, really a challenge, talking while painting, but hopefully the result will justify it and you'll enjoy the process. So here we have that tree trunk and it comes all the way through that highlight, but then it's important to keep those highlights right around here. We have the dog. We don't want to go over the dog. And from here on out, let's cool it up just a little bit and maybe add a bit of red to it too, because it's the shadows on the ground right now, so that's fine. And as you can see, I'm moving in a well-connected manner. I'm trying to connect as much of the shapes as I can. Didn't get the exact glow I wanted on the yellow part here, but hopefully with some more shadows it will make it pop a little bit more. Now I do want to put in some abstract kind of tree trunks or whatever it is here in the shadow, just to make this negative shape a little more interesting, and here as well. This nice gap, we can add some branches onto that. This seems like it's okay now. So now I'm going to move on into the buildings. And to do that, I'm going to switch modes a bit and use more yellow, because the shadows on the houses here are a little warmer, I would say. So maybe even kind of an orangey color, and be very careful, like so. And what I really want to do is negative paint around the rooftops, but also around the foliage down below. Okay, that's another important thing that I want to make sure that I leave as a highlight. We do have that part here, trying to be loose but also keep some of the important essential details intact here. I'm going to cool it up just a bit with some blue, just to have some variety here, maybe a bit more blue. Yeah, here we go. It's a real challenge narrating this while I'm doing that. So again, if the result suffers from that, my apologies. I'm trying my best. It's not always easy. Now for this roof, for this wall, I think I'll start with some blue. A bit more blue, less green. From the very top. And then I'm going to slowly warm it up. I think that'll be a nice way of representing how the ground is reflected onto the wall and makes it a little warmer. So starting with a bit more blue here, like so. And then I'm going to slowly switch into more of an orange-ish kind of, you see, like this. Maybe not as harsh a change as I did here. Get this corner right, and this corner as well. Maybe a bit of that here. That looks nice. Some wet and wet while we're at it. The wall on the right tends to be a little darker, so I will darken it up just a little bit. We can do more of that later on. But now my main concern is to finish up with the left area here. I'm going to go over that shed thing. I just doesn't add much into this for now. So. And then we go around these, the foliage or whatever that is. And you can start to see how a shadow is established. I'm going to add a bit more warmth to it right near the bottom, because I do see that it gets a little warmer. And at the very bottom, because we can see under the building, I will add just a bit of a very dark area like this and let it bleed upwards, okay? Because it is there. Now we do have these air condition engine things. I'm gonna add these, just an indication of them wet and wet. And we also have this shadow here with all this greenery. So I'll probably, you know what, I'm gonna get it now. And hopefully, even if me talking makes the process not as good as it could have been, at least by hearing me speak, you get an idea for what I'm thinking about. Okay, that's also important, and a lot of you have noted that this is what you found helpful, in fact. So now I'm putting in those shrubs and trees and all of that. I'm leaving just a bit of a gap here for highlight. You don't have to, but I kind of like the way it looks, so I'm gonna do it like that. We're gonna have a strong shadowy area here where I'm going now. I'm gonna add that later on, that's fine. Get some of these shrubs and trees and all of that. Like this, there's a row of them, an entire row, and then it connects to this grassy area. I'm gonna get just some dry brush effect here. That's all you really need. Maybe we have one of these trees coming at the very front. And what you'll see me do in just a moment is I'm gonna start doing some wet and wet application to make these a little darker near the bottom, because we do have some shadows here. So let's add a bit of blue, a bit of this muted yellow. It's gonna mute our green, maybe a bit of normal. Just a bit of everything really. And then put it onto these kind of shrubs and so on. And I think I'm gonna connect this part like this. We don't need that gap here. And now I will add some shadows wet and wet. I don't want these to be too prominent. So I'm gonna get some more blue. And again, as I mentioned, with ultramarine blue, it's a bit harder sometimes to produce the darker values. So you have to really pull out a lot of that. And so don't worry if, you know, I talk about making the values as dark as they need to be. Don't worry if that takes some effort. A lot of people are very timid in their brushes, in their palettes and brushes in general. Don't worry about that. Now I'm adding a bit of red because that'll help darken it up a little. Like this. This part should be a little darker because it's closest to us. And then I can cut these shadows in an interesting way, as you can see here. Just trying not to overdo it. Now at the very bottoms of these parts we have a very strong shadow, so I'm mixing at a separate area. I need zero moisture. Okay, so I'm grabbing a lot of the blue, some of the red because it's a very aggressive red, and then I'm gonna place these shadows right under the foliage, and hopefully that'll connect it to the ground. Okay, like so. Maybe a bit here. Now we do have these poles coming out of the ground, and I think these will work well if I use some more aggressive orange or blue, or red, sorry. So I'm gonna put these in because we are missing some pure red. I'm gonna put these in, allow them some time to mix. Maybe another one here behind this tree. Now, when I look at it again, this part should be a little lower. So I'm going to add a shadow that makes this a little lower. Hopefully I don't mess up the washes. That's fine. Now I did want to add a bit of shadow under the rooftop here, but that won't happen because it's already dry. Ideally, I would have my water sprayer and I'll spray as much as necessary. I actually did that in the original painting, but that's fine. So I'm gonna do this shadow now, and on the left part I will use a bit more of a warmer shadow, so I may even allow it to be really almost orange. Maybe a bit more of this red and yellow, raw sienna. Here we go. Just, you gotta be careful around some areas, but once you go past them, you're good to go. I'm gonna get that rooftop in here like this. I'm trying not to smear the paint that I already put here. Again, working with minimal brush strokes, with minimal details, only what's necessary. Really, it's our job as the painters to only put in what's necessary, okay? Now, moving on to the right side, I will cool it up a bit. just to create some interest. Hopefully that'll work out as a nice little effect. Here we go. Around this rooftop. Now I have to come around here, and hopefully you can still hear me well, but I have to do this if I want to get the shape right. I'm not as proficient yet with like very loose grips of the brush. Trying to learn that. Like Alvaro really travels all over the paper. That's really a challenge for me. So in any case, now I'm going to do some wet in wet here. And I'm testing the ground. I'm putting just a bit of it to see how it'll spread. And I seem to have enough control, so I already established this small window here. This part should be darker, so I'm going to drop in some darker paint. Too much water, like so. Around this part. This entire area should be a little darker, so I'm just going to put in some dark paint here and there. And I'll probably darken the right side a bit because it is cooler, but it's not, it's of very similar value. And you need to, when you're doing wet and wet, and I was going to make a wet and wet tutorial, you really need to push the value sometimes, the consistency of paint on the brush, just to get the value you want. Now here, it probably already, okay, it's not fully dried, which is good for me. I did want to add a very gentle shadow here, so I'm going to do that. Hopefully it will spread out nicely, like so. What else we're missing here? I think we're almost done with this wash. Just having to really concentrate and think and figure out what's missing here. Oops, messed this up a bit. There is actually a shadow like that on the rooftop, but I'm going to get rid of it and readjust that like so. We're going to correct this entire area. I'm going to drop a much heavier shadow by the trees. Trying not to overwork this, but unfortunately it'll probably be just a little overworked. But in any case, and we can already probably add the trees on the left. But the one thing I do want to do with these trees is make sure they're not too dark and they're not too well defined, because I don't want them to compete with the rest of the painting, but I do feel like they're necessary to make it work completely. So I'm just adding mostly the not too strong yellow. I'm going to mute it down a bit, like so. Using the side of the brush just to get this very rough hint of a tree here. And back then I did add a smaller one here and it ended up working very nicely. So that'll work as well. Right around this part of the rooftop. Here I have to be a little more careful. There we go. And there isn't a clear distinction between the two, so I'm just making this a little taller. And basically we're done. Now we have the shape of the detail on the rooftop and all of that. We have the people that we can already put a detail on. I think the guy on the right is going to have a white shirt, so I'm not going to touch that at all. And the person on the left, let's do like a red kind of... should it be red? Yes, let's make it red. Just a red shirt here. Really make it small, make it strong, sorry. To have it really well defined. Bit of darker value here on their feet. Mid-walk, like this. Hopefully that'll be enough of a suggestion. I can add their shadow now as well, but I just want a bit of a lighter paint for the shadow, like this, and for the other person as well. I'm jumping up a few steps in advance, but that's fine. And I'm going to add the feet to the other figure as well, just like that. Here we go. And the dog, I'll probably just use a very light gray to indicate some shadow on it. Not too much, and then some darker paint for its shadow. And I think the rest we're going to leave for the next washes. I will do the face as well, so just a bit of orange for that. Right around here. And we can later on use some opaque paint to bring out some highlights if necessary. But for now, I think this will work. Let's see if there's anything else here that we need right now. I don't see anything like that, so I think we'll let it dry a bit and then come back with the final stages. There is one more shape I want to add because it is a free space that I can touch right now, is the shadow right over this detail here. There is a strong shadow, like so, that I did want to make sure I get in there. And I think now we can allow it some time to dry. Okay, so now this is fully dry, and as most of the really good watercolor painters I follow always say, you have to know what your next step is if you really want to be able to do it properly. So let's talk a bit about what's left to do here. We have basically a few trees here on the right. What I want to do is create a differentiation and show where the two main ones are. So we have this one with the trunk here and another one here, and all the rest is going to be sent into the background. So we're going to use very dark values to bring those out. What this will do is create a nice little negative shape around that person with the white shirt, and it will be a really, really cool effect. And we can also then add a very gentle shadow on these two people's shirts. But this will really make the people pop, the dog as well, from within the shadow. We're going to add some final details onto the rooftops, the walls, some windows. We're going to add this shed here, and just some final details, generally speaking. So the best part to start really is the darkest part, the largest shape. Sorry, this entire thing is going to be much darker. So I'm starting to pick up some paint here, and again, it takes a bit of time to produce a very dark value with this kind of blue. So there we go, we got a lot of thick paint. Now I want to start by indicating some shadow here, like this, like so. Maybe a little less water, just so that I can get that a bit of an effect here, trying, and then connect this to the top. This is how it looks in the reference as well. And I'm continuing to make my way. Now we're gonna have to get this part to be very, very dark, okay? So it may take another player here, which is the Carbazole Violet that I use for these instances. Now what's good about it is that it also works really well with the Nickel Azo Yellow, so that you can get a bit of a neutral kind of grayish, let's say violet or yellow, depending on how you use them. So, and the consistency and the ratio, sorry. So now we have this, a bit of a shadow under that branch as well. I do want to get some kind of an effect here, so let me just try with the edge of the brush. Okay, yeah, now that's good. Like this, like that. And now what's important is to really connect it to the shape of the tree trunks, which is exactly what I'm going to do here. And I'll also try and leave the gaps from earlier open still. So this is where the main tree kind of ends. Now I do want to blend in some of that edge. I don't like the way it looks, sorry. I'm going to try and blend in some of that. Some of this, it's too harsh, it's too pattern-like, so that's much better. Ideally, I would have done all of that wet in the beginning, but now it's too late. I should have done that earlier. But in any case, so I'm putting in the darks. Now, again, it's important to make the distinction of what's the tree trunk that's closest to us, which is this. Okay, like this. And then maybe we'll add another branch like so. Then we've got right next to the ground a bit of a darker area as well that it's important, I think, to get, because it will hint at the negative shapes of other trees in the background, like this. And I'm going to try not to lose my fluidity here, because what happens is you run out of water on the brush, on the palette, and then you have to continuously add some more water, but then you don't want to add too much water. So then we have a shadow here. It's very dark, and it's encapsulates this roof there. Now we have strong trunks here. Then we connect to this area. Now here I have to be a little more careful around the people. I don't want to mess this up. Still using a rather big brush, but that's just because I'm very used to it and I have some confidence in it, but it's probably not the smartest move, I wouldn't lie. But here we go. Now here, I do think this needs to disappear a bit, like that. Really just looking at the scene and trying to interpret what I see. That's all there is to it here, really. These shadows are rather dark, so I wouldn't worry about darkening them a little more. And on the ground, to really contrast with the yellow, I will add some more of the violet without too much worry. And I'm going to connect all of this to the shadow here, like this, and then all the way around here, around the dog, around this person, and hopefully that'll be enough of a dark shadow to create that interest in the foreground. What else should we add here? Maybe just patch this shape up a little bit. And this is pretty much done in terms of the trees. Now there is a much darker shadow here. So I will go back to this area. I'm actually going to switch out the brushes now. I'm going to use this thinner Princeton brush. I'm going to add a bit of yellow to that violet. Just neutralize it a bit and keep it warm. And again, this is a rather dark shadow that I do want to add, but it's a bit green now. So I'm going to add a bit of red here, because I don't want it to feel green. This is the wall of the building. So there should be a clear distinction between that and the foliage. And I think now I'm going to remove some paint off of the brush, and I'm going to darken this part, but ever so slightly and gently. Okay? Like this, like that. Close off that shape. Maybe add just a bit of blue to the mix. And make it a little stronger. And there we go. Now I could use this opportunity to add this very gentle shadow here, but this I'm going to do in just a moment. What's next? I think this is the main shadowy shape that we needed to get in here. I will get a shadow on the person's shirt here, but I have to be very careful with that, and the light comes from the right, generally speaking, so I will drop that shadow here on his left. And I'm going to add a bit of blue here just to the bottom of the pants or whatever that is, like so. And for the other person, I may add again another just very gentle shadow here. That's not a must really. So we get a bit of a definition on them. Now one more thing, I do recognize this small gap here that I don't need on his head. This can really hurt the impression. Now it's much better, and also here on the left I have to be very careful. Now ergonomically what I'm doing right now is not the most comfortable. I have my camera in a bit of a different position because I'm trying out something different, but that turned out not to be the smartest choice, which is why I'm having a bit of trouble with the brushwork as well. But for the next time I promise I'll improve that so I won't have these problems. Now I do think these, you know what, I'm not going to touch these too much. I don't want to mess it up. I feel like it'll be too many details. So what I'm going to do now is move on to the final details of the rooftop, stuff like that. I need a very dry brush for that, and I'm going to use a rather neutral combination. So I'm just picking up all of my primary colors, again, French Ultramarine, Permanent Red, and Nickel Azo Yellow, and trying to build out of that this very dry brush-ish effect. And I'm going to start by adding some of that here and make an even stronger differentiation between the rooftop and the actual building. I'm going to add a bit of dry brush here. Now this, you can see some of the wooden planks here, so I will add that. That's a nice little hint at the impression. You can also do a bit of that here, just very gentle. Now I cleaned off some of the paint off of the brush because I want to put these windows in very gently. Same goes for this window. We're not after too many details here. This should be darker, but I'm contemplating. I think I'm going to leave it as is, just add a bit of an indication under the actual roof here. What else should we do now? Maybe I'm going to take a bit of a stylized approach and just drop a very gentle line here. Too much water on the brush. Just a very gentle line near the middle, and then I'm going to blur some of that out. That'll create a better separation between the two parts of the building. Next up we have, again, these lines. Kind of like that. We have some very strong shadow under that rooftop. That'll create a nice little differentiation between the rooftop and the actual structure. Now here, I do want to hint at some kind of a line that separates these two structures, okay? Trying not to overdo it. This part should be a little darker. We have quite a lot of imaginary doors and windows in this area. Another window here. Again, being very minimally minimal in my description of these objects. Now we have the air condition engines that are outside the building, and that's good enough as an indication. Just scanning the area, figuring out what's missing. There's actually a ladder here that I may add just for the fun of it. Sometimes you make these spontaneous decisions. Now I feel like the shadows under the figures aren't prominent enough, so I'm gonna darken and make them a little longer, like so. The dog, foot. Okay, now we're good with that. Now all I have really to do here is I'm gonna add this small structure to the left, the shed, and then finally some really small details on the rooftops of the shingles and stuff like that. So this should be very dark. I'm going to use my Carbazole Violet and some yellow to neutralize it, and hopefully the result will be good. When you do these kinds of things, you always take a bit of a risk. You don't know exactly how it's going to turn out to be. But I think in this case, the result is good. I'm going to come from this side. Sorry if I obstruct the camera, but there we go. A bit of a structure here. This actually calls for some more details, I think, here. So I'm going to put in... I'm actually looking at what I did in the previous work. Maybe I'll add just a bit of that, like this. Just a bit of a diagonal line to that, and hopefully that makes it work. But I think it works well, and it at least closes off some of that area. I could do this. I could add a bit of a diagonal line here, indicating the shape, and maybe another one on the other side. That way at least it reads as something that continues to the left. Hopefully that works. What else do we have here? So just the final details on the rooftops. I'm actually going to get my rigger brush just a moment. So these are some very fine details that you really have to be careful with. And I need something as thin as my rigger brush. I'm going to list all of the tools I'm using in the description box. I've been doing that recently, and hopefully you find it helpful. But it's just very basic tools. I don't want you to get too caught up on the tools because they're not that important. So now I'm going to clean off some of that, and this is one of the trickiest techniques really to do in watercolor, is getting the consistency of the paint on a rigger brush just right. That's one of my biggest challenges actually. So now I'm going to start putting in some details for the shingles, like so. Try and keep those as parallel as you can. There's a bit of that curvature here that I could just indicate with this gentle line. We have these lines here, like so. This rooftop barely has any detail, so I'm just going to put this dividing line, and that'll be it for this. Although I did put, on the other one, I did put some more details here, so let's try it out. Actually looks good. This will keep empty because there is just not enough space to fill it. And finally, we come to these two rooftops. So just a bit of detail, a little too much paint and water on the brush. I constantly move away from the camera, so hopefully you can still hear me. Sorry if the audio is a little wonky here. Trying to balance it out later on in editing. But audio editing is something I'm still not as good at as I would have wished to be. Just some final details. This is really like drawing or writing or calligraphy, and it is quite a challenge sometimes, so don't worry if it's hard for you, because right now it is also hard for me to get the right angle, as you can see here. But I think the more important part is that these lines end around here, and that way the feeling of this kind of detail or barrier gets even stronger, and there is a little shadow here on top of that. What else? Maybe just a bit of a stronger shadow on the top parts of the windows. Some stronger shadow under the air-conditioned thingy. I did add a bit of a red spot here that turned out to look quite nicely on the engines right over here. I know it can barely be read as anything really, but that's just an indication of some detail. I'm going to put these lines here at the top, so hopefully that makes some kind of sense. And we have the dog leash that we want to get in. And this, one sweeping motion. And I think with that, we're pretty much done. There is a small, gentle shadow here, actually between the roof and that structure. But I think overall we are done with this. I'm gonna just sign it, and maybe later I'll find some other things I want to add. And you can always play around with some details here in the shadow. You can add a bit of, you know, tree trunks, stuff like that. Maybe even here, where it starts to be visible. You can always play around with it and add some more details if you feel like it. It's easy to overdo for most people. For me, it's actually not easy to overdo because at some point I just don't know what to do. My problem is not that I will add more and more details. It's actually that I wouldn't know what details are necessary. But in any case, yeah, now I'm going to just sign it. I'm going to add my name here on the right corner where it won't be too strong. And I really hope you enjoyed this process. We're going to wrap it up face-to-face in just a moment. But again, real-time demo. I think there's a lot of value to that. A lot of people have been asking me to do more of these. So let me know what you think of this kind of experimentation of just doing these quick watercolor tutorials, maybe for the next, I don't know, a week and a half or 2 weeks, something like that. So about 6 videos of just tutorials. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. One last note, the sky here could have been done a little better, I think, using wet and wet, because you see I did get a lot of harsh edges. So that's one thing to consider. Probably these trees could be a little darker. I'm going to do that now just for the hell of it. Just darken it up a bit. And you know, a lot of paintings have been ruined by just trying something small, but I'm going to do it regardless because I'm brave. And I will be the one who takes the risk for you so that later on you know what not to do. So in any case, yeah, now that works nicely and it balances out the trees on the other side. I want to thank you so much, and now we will wrap it up. So this is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. I think, again, as I think I mentioned this could have benefited more from a wet and wet approach. I think the result would have been better like I did here. It will send it to the background and bring forward the more important parts. But in any case, still very pleased with it. I think I made a few decisions that were a little better here when it comes to the color selection, as well as the placing the 2 people here. Overall, very pleased with it. Just a simple, quick painting. And I find these to be very enjoyable. So I hope you enjoyed this process too. And again, let me know in a comment below what you think of me doing for the next just a week and a half or 2 weeks these kinds of tutorials, not any of the other series, just for a short while, because I do want to try that out. And aside from that, if you still haven't, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button. This is going to make sure that you get notifications for when new videos are out. Then you can watch them or save them for later. Also follow me on Instagram if you want to see some real-time updates. It's going to be, the link is going to be down in this. I don't know why I did this. It's going to be down there. So check it out. Also, if you want to learn how to draw like me, be sure to check the very first link in the description box of this video, which is going to be my beginner's drawing course. Okay? So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts, and I will see you again in another one real soon.